Hey, everybody, Sheriff Lamb here, and thank you for joining us with another podcast of On the Border with Sheriff Lamb, brought to you by FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And we have a great guest today. Our guest is he was my congressman for a long time, which I would proudly tell everybody. Now he is in the 9th district. When they redistrict, I got Congressman Andy Biggs and Paul Gosar. Well, he's not my congressman. He is actually the congressman in a lot of the parts of the county where I was sheriff. Was fortunate enough to be the sheriff in Pinal County for 8 years. I am now the former Pinal County sheriff, which I'm still getting used to. But without further ado, I'm going to bring on my guest because I'm excited. Not only am I an admirer of the work that Congressman Paul Gosar does, he has been doing this for 8 terms now, which that alone deserves an award. The fact that you have been able to negotiate and put up with DC for 8 terms. He is the congressman for the 9th District of the House of Representatives for Arizona. He is on the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, and you also sit on the subcommittee for federal law enforcement oversight. Without further ado, I'd love to bring in my former congressman, but one of our great Arizona congressmen and my great friend, Paul Gosar. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Congressman.
My pleasure, Sheriff. Always a pleasure to see you.
Well, it's great to see you, and I hope your family's doing good. We're going to jump right in because I know you're on a tight schedule. You guys got a lot of work to do here in D.C. Well, I want to jump right into the border stuff. Obviously, that's what this show's about. I want to talk a little bit about what we saw over the last 4 years. It's been devastating for this country. It's been devastating for Arizona. I think we've had, by their admission, 11 million people come in, which I think you and I both know that number is a lot higher.
Yep.
I think they pretty much gave up on the gotaways. They weren't counting the CBP One app stuff. They were doing a lot of shenanigans with the numbers. 570,000 in Arizona alone in this last year. We could go on and on about the statistics, but what I really want to know is, as a sheriff, a former sheriff in Arizona, as a constituent of Arizona, we've seen those devastating effects in our state. And now we're seeing this new president come in. Can you talk a little bit about first what have been those devastating effects you've seen to your residents in Arizona and to law enforcement in Arizona?
Well, first, Sheriff, thank you for all the times that you took us down with all our comrades and people up here. So thank you for sharing that with us and showing people firsthand. Because I think once you see it, you'll never forget it. You'll never forget it. Well, you know, the ramifications to our state, to my district, has been like I have Yuma way out there in no man's land. We've seen the food banks decimated. We see that citizens can't get health care at their hospital. They're almost $30 million in arrears. Do you think about the fentanyl that's come in, the crime, the extra crime? It is lo and behold, a bad situation.
You are so right. And I'm so glad you brought up those points, Congressman, because I do interviews and I hear people talk about the border all the time, but very rarely do they talk about the hospitals and how they're affected, the schools and how they're affected, all of the things that you mentioned. So I appreciate you bringing that up because I think the average citizen, when we talk border, they have this narrow idea of what it is. But it has so many tentacles to it. And
it's amazing, isn't it? It's really amazing because you think a woman from Yuma couldn't even get in the hospital to have a baby. She had to be flown over to Phoenix to have that done because all the beds were taken up by illegals.
That's crazy. And I know we've talked several times with the guy, the gentleman that runs the hospital in Yuma, and he talked that it was $28 million, I think, that it cost their hospital.
Uncompensated care. So, and these people got all these aspects down to it. And these are things we have to start really looking at, Mark, because just because of economics, you can't be here for just economic reasons. You have to be in pursuit or being in fear of your life. That might be 10,000 out of all these people, maybe 10,000, but it's definitely not in the millions, not in the hundreds of thousands.
No, you're exactly right. And I know for a fact, having talked to many of the immigration judges, well into the lowest figure I've ever heard is 75, and I think they're being generous. I think the number is well into the 90 percentile of people will have their claims denied.
Absolutely.
You probably saw this the first day that President Trump took office. I've never seen a president do what he did, where he sat in front of it, sat in an auditorium and signed these executive orders. Many of those executive orders, I think, had a big impact on Arizona. Some of the things he talked about was letting law enforcement get back, federal law enforcement get back to doing it. I know you sit on the subcommittee for federal law enforcement, so I'm going to ask you about how that affected. They talked about the remain in Mexico. They started construction again. How do you, as a congressman, see, what do you hope to see the executive orders from President Trump on day one? How do you see that impacting federal law enforcement and their ability to do the job in securing our border?
Well, first of all, the 287G program, this is one that allowed people to communicate with federal law enforcement, having the locals help in. You guys, we're all in the same boat here. So why not being able to use everybody here? I think that's a real key point here. And number two is putting that dictation to being a secure border. The men and women who were in the previous administration were forbidden to actually do anything like this. Now you're enforcing the law. That's your job. And I think the whole morale of the place has changed dramatically from what I've seen. I see Art Coahueco. He's got a nice big smile on his face every time I see him. He has anyway, but he's got a great outlook on life. But they're actually, the people around him are all smiling because they're getting to do their job. And people look at me and go, well, a lot of these are poor families and kids. Really? Really? Come on now. You come to this country and you violate its original law. The first tenet is that you come here, you have to be invited in. You don't run across and violate somebody's law. You don't run in somebody's house and start going to town in their house without having their permission. And that's what sovereignty is all about. What I'm hoping to see is this administration to continue. You start seeing Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, down there. Now you see Pete Hegseth, the head of the Secretary of the Military. I just wonder if we should be able to take some of our men and women from Germany. Why do we need 30,000 or 50,000 men and women over there? Why not put them on our southern border? That's how important this is.
You said something. It's not rocket science. This is just merely enforcing the law. Yeah. I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but I want to talk about, so Trump now, he gets to work day one, and you talked about all of the resources coming together, DEA, CBP, ICE, Border Patrol, and it does. You talked about the sheer size of the problem and how it's going to take a lot to get on top of it. We talk about the criminals. That's one of the things that Border Czar Tom Homan and Trump talked about, going after the criminals that are in this country, which are estimated to be above 600. And I think you and I both agree this is probably a low estimate, but 650,000 criminals that have either been convicted or have committed crimes here. Some of the numbers were staggering.
That's what I couldn't believe, Sheriff. It was like 13,000 were convicted of murder.
Yes.
I was like, holy crap. This is unbelievable that they actually put those numbers out. But when they did that, then you saw Tom Homan start doing his homework because they are like a precision instrument. They went in right after certain people and they got them right at the very first day. And you got to love that about Tom and the president. They're cutting all the fat out of here and they're going right to the action.
Which is what's needed. When you talk about it, you mentioned 13,000 people for murder. They had 15,000 for sexual assault, 62,000 for assault, 2,500 for kidnapping. These are only the ones that have been charged or convicted. Imagine how many we haven't found that are committing these crimes.
How about all the people that took these young kids? They lost all these minors.
Yeah.
Over 200,000 minors have been lost. They have no idea where they went. We're complicit to human trafficking, the last administration was.
Thank you. And how is that not the number one issue on the news every night? Where are these kids? Where are these kids? We talk about.
America has their whole mindset that they have some control over the situation. Kids don't.
They don't.
Pawned off back and forth to different parcels of people. That's wrong answer.
So we've got the criminals. We've got the people I just heard from ICE, they have over 8,000 people or 8 million people they let into this country that are now going to have to go through a court hearing because they released them into our country. We've got the criminals. It's a big job. How do you see local law enforcement? What role do you see them playing in this massive job that the federal government has been tasked with now that the previous administration has allowed this problem to get so out of hand?
Well, back. You're the eyes and ears on the local level. They always say government is always best from at the local level, not the federal level. That's the same way with law enforcement. It's all about the local level. You're the eyes and hands and the ears of the federal government, so you can actually participate. And then we're going to see grants coming back to the mainstream of America, to the sidewalks of America in Arizona, where we're enabling and enhancing that communication skill set between local departments of law and federal law. Because, we can't be everywhere. So we got to put our assets to the right place and we got to utilize them and leverage them right.
And I know you guys have been very supportive in the past. What allows us to work, for example, in Pinal County or a lot of the border counties, Stone Garden funding. Do you anticipate that Stone Garden funding staying in place or maybe even increasing?
I do. I really do. Because what this administration has said, they're cutting the fat. We talked about having human trafficking, sex trafficking. How much of that is going underneath here?
Yeah.
And
how much have we funded of it?
Oh, that's exactly right, Sheriff. We had our Super Bowl a while back, and I got included in that conversation. Most people don't realize that the human trafficking, the sex trafficking during a Super Bowl is incredible. It's one of the biggest events of a year for them. And to be behind the curtain on that one, that was eye-opening. Eye-opening.
I don't think the average citizen has any idea what kind of trafficking goes on, not just of women, but of children as well, and how the cartel has been so intimately involved in this, how it directly correlates with the border issues. We talked about, the terrorists, how they're viewed and what kind of fear they strike into the hearts of people here in America. There are actually communities, though, that are saying we're not going to participate. We're sanctuary cities. I know under Title 8, 1324, it says you can't harbor, shield, or conceal people that have been in this country illegally. How do you see this moving forward with these cities that are claiming or wanting to be sanctuary cities or saying we're not going to help with the federal government?
Well, I find it very interesting. Let's take the fires in California for a second. There's going to be some conditions on that money coming out there to rebuild that stuff. Well, the same thing happens when you defy federal law. So I remember once upon a time that Wyoming, I originally was born in Wyoming, and they said, nope, you can't enforce the 18 years of age for drinking. So Wyoming took their own thing and they fought it. And guess what? They capitulated because they had no highway funds. Well, once again, you got the federal government can do that here as well. Now we have to have a strong backbone and say, listen, you either believe in the full and equal application of the law or you don't. And if you don't belong in this country.
That's right. We're a country of laws, and that's kind of what I've always said. If we're going to be a country of laws, it means we have to enforce all of the laws. And one of those laws is you cannot come into this country illegally. And another piece of that law is you can't harbor, conceal, or shield those people that came into this country or any criminal, but especially it mentions distinctly people that have come into this country illegally. And so I expect, I don't know if you do, but I expect that either the Justice Department, Tom Homan, there's going to be some consequences, I think, for those sanctuary cities that do choose to continue to go down the road. I describe them as the people playing the piano on the Titanic. Nobody wants to hear the song they're playing anymore, but they're still playing it while they're going down.
They are. Well, a lot of this, Sheriff, you bring up a really good point. Is one of the things that we were taken back by was the NGOs, the non-government organizations, and how much money they were taking in. So we actually crafted a bill that would require any NGO that took 1 penny from the federal government, either directly or indirectly through a pass-through, would have to be required to tell us, federal government, where they got all the rest of their money. What were they leveraging? But now we're going to track the money because if we can follow the money, We're going to find out where the Soros money's coming in. We're finding out where the Chinese money's coming in, where the Russian money, where the Ukrainian money's coming in. Because it's all playing not just in immigration, but whether it being our environmental laws, our energy laws, all those things are being disrupted, if you know, worldwide fashion. That's why we needed this guy. He's the one guy I know of is perfect for this position. He's the perfect person at the perfect time for the perfect job. And that's Donald Trump as president of the United States.
You needed somebody to come in that had the fortitude to say, "Hey, we're going to look at this. We're going to ensure that those tax dollars were spent appropriately," which we know that a lot of those tax dollars were not. We know that a lot of the money that went to those NGOs were only aiding and abetting in the trafficking of the humans into this country, women, children, men. And I love that you guys are actually going to hold them accountable to say, where did you spend that money? And who else added money into it? Because I think that's an important piece to understanding just how we got here over the last 4 years.
Well, a lot of it, Mark, has been white collar crime. It's still crime. You're stealing money. You're stealing money from the taxpayer. Enough's enough.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, one of the things that has been a big tool for helping the federal government that I know FAIR is very supportive of, and I've been supportive of. I was one of the only jails in the state of Arizona that was a 287G jail. For the listeners that don't know what that is a program through the ICE, through the immigration, that allows local jails to work with the federal government. What it does is it means that when we arrest somebody commits a crime, we then process them and we notify ICE if we think they're here illegally. ICE then has the right, they process them and decide if they're going to put a detainer on them. And when they're released, they come pick them up. Do you anticipate Biden, he kind of allowed a lot of these contracts for 287G to lapse?
Yep.
Or they just weren't even signing anybody new up, re-signing up. Do you anticipate that program will increase again, that the funding will be there so that local jails can, once again, and local law agencies can participate in the 287G program?
I do think it's going to increase in funding, but I also think it's also going to increase in its mission statement. Because I think there's maybe some little glitches that can be identified and corresponds to that we don't miss anybody.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to also be, but that's one of the reasons why I got to get to a budget, Mark, Sheriff, because you get no new startups with a CR. That's why it's so important to tell your representative, hey, we got to make some huge cuts here because we got to keep our solvency. We got to keep our monetary wits about us. We can't be spending $1 trillion every year to pay for our debt service, just servicing our debt.
I can tell you, as one of your constituents, that has always been something that I have loved about you, is that you are very watchful when it comes to getting the budgets right and doing the right thing with the taxpayer money, and I thank you for it. I want to ask you another. One of the executive orders signed the first day was an executive order that was a little bit of a hot button for a lot of people, and that is birthright citizenship, the 14th Amendment. Where do you stand on this, and what do you anticipate might come from this?
I think Donald Trump was very clever. He was clever as a fox because you can't talk about immigration and reforms within immigration without talking about birthright citizenship. And so what did he do? He made it one of his first EOs, executive orders. Why? Because now it's got to go through its challenges. And you're going to start to see everybody saying, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Well, let's step back for a second. In our Constitution, it says that if you're a member of a attaché or a consulate or an ambassador's office from a foreign country here, anybody born on the United States ground is not a citizen. That specifically. They keep bending out this rule about this is what happened in 1892 with this Chinese kid. And his parents were exiled. They had no they had no ties to any foreign government. So they allowed this kid to get a citizen. Well, that's very different than what we find here. We're seeing these parents who are coming from, let's say, Honduras or Cuba, or let's say even Africa. They have an allegiance to those countries. That's where they're from. And so any child born there or born here, their allegiance is back to where the parents are from. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say to that point, I think I don't know the exact verbiage, but it says who is under the jurisdiction of.
Thereof.
Yes.
That's exactly right. So it's going to be very interesting to see this at the court because it's going all the way to the Supreme Court. And I think it's going to be a tough wrestle. And particularly John Roberts. I think these are things he's going to be, and Amy Coney Barrett. I want to see her perk this up.
Okay.
I don't worry about Thomas and Alito and Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, but those other two, I'll tell you, I'm going to be very interested to see how this works.
But I think that there's so many big problems that needed to be challenged. And like you said, President Trump is certainly the one that is challenging these things that for so many decades, people have just said, we don't want to tackle that. And I appreciate you addressing this and tackling all these issues with me today. Is there anything else you want to share with the people, the American people, the people of Arizona? Well, I've got you here. Any messages you want to put out? What do you see over the next 2 years? What do you hope to see? This is your opportunity to send a message out to whoever you want to.
Well, I think there's so many things outside the box, Sheriff, we could be doing. So number one, I brought up earlier talking about where our realignment of our military bases. You're going to have to take on the cartels with military. So why not take them all along our southern border? It's going to minimize. You're going to have a wall there. You're going to have this military behind there. You have a great opportunity to really get this down right and follow through with the homeland, protection of the homeland. It also is going to restrict, we have cells. We don't know how many we have cells, but we know we have some cells in our country now that want to do us harm. It's not a matter of if, it's when. I hate to say it that way, but you can't have, as they say, 13 million and plus another 2 or 3 for gotaways. No, you can't have even 30 million people coming in here without having a few bad apples. So we got to do this, and we got to do this as a country. We got to do this as a team. If you see something, you got to speak something out. That's why we're going to need all our local law enforcement together with our federal and state cops. Everybody working together as the same team. So I want to see that. Number 2, maybe we can make some incentives for our military young people that have young families that aren't making things go. Maybe there's some kind of a land exchange we can do so that they have abilities to build a house. Maybe it's their first house, and they can get some chickens or whatever. But maybe we think outside the box a little bit here. And then last but not least, there's a way to pay for this. The last election I saw Social Security being a big issue because people were really hurting, Mark. They weren't making their bills. And Social Security played a bigger part than most people thought. So why not make it perfect? Why not give them the incentive? So what we said is, okay, we're going to take 10% of all our public lands, 10% of all the revenues coming off our public lands, and we're going to put it in the Social Security Trust Fund box. There's nothing there. We owe 2.91 trillion. All we do is pay off the interest. So why don't we give them a tangible asset that they can build on? I know if I was one of those people, I'd say, listen, whoa, you mean we're taking it away from the bureaucrats and giving it to us so we can really do something with this? It's magic. So I want to empower the American people. I don't want to hurt. I'm not scared of the empowerment. I want them this is their country. This is their public lands. And what you want to do with it, it was mind-boggling that somebody like a senator, U.S. senator, or a president, previous president, or secretary of state would even want to damage this country. It's given us so much. It's always that beacon of hope. And even if you slide it just a little bit by saying, listen, we don't belong here, but we're going anyway, defy the rule of law, that's the wrong answer. I would much rather, if we needed 5 million people, I'd rather go to those people standing in line saying, your magic day came up a little early. Let's go. Because then they've been standing in line. They can understand why people cut in front of them and get away with it. So sad. But America's greatest days are ahead of her. We're entering the golden era because we got somebody who's got a spine, a guy who's got a backbone. They hate this guy so badly, it tells you he's the right person for the right job at the right time in our history.
I couldn't agree with you more. And see, this is why I loved you as my congressman, and I love that you're a congressman from Arizona. You're optimistic. You love this country. You're a patriot. You think outside the box. And you want what's best, and I know that you're willing to do what this bureaucracy has created in DC, you're willing to fight against it. And for that, I say thank you. And also for your continued support and work on the border. I know as a sheriff, I could always count on you, Congressman Biggs, and so many other people
Eli.
to actually, Eli, to bring people to the border to see it firsthand and really understand what it was.
Well, you
Thank
helped us
you.
for that, Sheriff. So I want to tell you, for all the sheriffs along the border, you were one of the best. But it was everybody was helpful to us. And I look at all our information. Most of the time I would go to the border unannounced, down in Yuma. And they're like, "Oh, he's back again. Oh, he didn't announce he's coming." But that's when you got to see the real thing. You brought us out there, and we got to see the real things.
Yeah.
I'll challenge people. If you've never seen a rape tree, you need to see it. Because you know what? Go through the anguish of every little girl, every woman, what they had to endure for that rape tree. You'll never forget it. You'll never forget it. And think it's that they're being exploited on your dime. America, how do you feel about that? I feel terrible that we're part of that.
That's powerful, Congressman, and I'm so glad you said that. And I think that is what Americans should reflect on, just what the impact is on our country and on people. There's actually people involved in this, so thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Congressman, it has been an absolute pleasure as always. I just, like I said, I appreciate you so much, and I sleep better knowing you're in DC fighting these fights for us. You may not, but I absolutely sleep better knowing that you're here.
Well, that's one thing I probably have in common with the president. I don't sleep very much. He doesn't sleep very much either.
Yeah, I don't know how you guys do it. You're machines. Like, I'm a machine too, but I think you guys got me under the table on this one. So,
Well, you'll probably live a lot longer and have a bigger smile than I will, Mark. So keep it up.
well, that's a compliment coming from a former dentist.
There you go.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Well,
Mark, and
Congressman,
appreciate you having us on.
God bless you. God bless this session. I hope you guys can get the budget fixed and continue to secure the border and do what needs to be done for the American people. Thank you so much for taking time with us today. Folks,
Sheriff,
this has been
Sheriff,
another
it's called
episode.
Tough love, and we have a little tough love right now.
We do need some tough love. This country needs some tough love, and you're the one. President Trump needs people like you in DC to help him do this.
Yeah,
and because you're doing it because you love this country and you're doing it for what's right for this country. So thank you.
You're certainly welcome, and God bless. If you got ideas, bring them forward because we love hearing those ideas.
Well, I'll catch you on the side and we'll have some ideas.
Yeah, we will. We will.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for joining us on another episode of On the Border with Sheriff Lamb. And please go to fairus.org. Donate today. This is how we do this great work, continuing to talk about the border, the policies that make this country fix the border policies in this country. So fairus.org. Make sure you go to their day. God bless everybody, and we'll see you next time.